You're listening to St. PeteX Season 2. Today's episode is brought to you by CapEx Advisory Group. When organizations undertake large capital or real estate projects, they turn to CapEx for additional resources and expertise. To learn what an owner's rep can do for you, visit CapEx's website at ceag2.com. That's CEAG2.com. And by the Open Partnership Education Network located at the University of South Florida in St. Petersburg. The world is open for citizens, businesses, groups, for all of us to become a smarter, better connected city by learning together. To find out more about Open, including upcoming great Aresti speakers, please visit learnopen.org. Now enjoy the conversation. Joining me on SPX today is the mayor of Tampa, Bob Buckhorn. Welcome, sir.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
We'll get warmed up a little bit with some questions about being misunderstood. Tell me two parts. First one, what is one thing people misunderstand about the office of mayor, and one thing that a lot of people misunderstand about you personally?
You know, I don't think people realize how powerful the mayor of Tampa is. I mean, it is a very, very strong mayor form of government by charter. The mayor doesn't sit on the city council. I go to city council once a year to present the budget. That's probably one time too many. There's no city manager. So you are the CEO of a billion-dollar enterprise with 4,500 employees: police, fire, solid waste, parks and recreation, revenue and finance. I mean, go down the list. You're running a large company here. And you are the predominant voice in the Tampa Bay area. The mayor of Tampa, when he or she speaks, carries weight. And that's important because as mayor, you can set the tone and the tenor for the region, and you can drive the region in a direction. And so it's been an amazing 8 years for me, but I don't think people realize that that particular office in the biggest media market in the state of Florida, in the 12th or 13th largest media market in the country, can really be a force for change. What they misunderstand about me, you know, after 30 years of public life, I'm not sure that there's much that they don't know about me. You know, the people know that I'm a dad and I'm a husband, and they've seen my kids grow up in public life. So I don't know that there's a lot that they misunderstand about me. I think early in my career, they misunderstood ambition for focus. You know, I was no shrinking violet, and I knew where I wanted to go, and I was not inclined to be dissuaded from that. So there were a lot of people who looked at me as far more ambitious than a young guy should have been. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you marriage and fatherhood and losing a few times will temper that. So it's, you know, I think I've mellowed in my old age, and certainly people's perceptions of me have mellowed as well.
And I think with 30 years under your belt, I'm taking it as a personal challenge in this conversation to usually you can answer the question before I even finish asking it because you've just done it so many times. So my challenge for this conversation is to find something that gets you to,
all right,
have to
I'm
think
ready.
for 3 seconds. So you mentioned the power that the position has. With great power comes great pressure. And, you know, a lot of times you see a lot of politicians sort of locked down into a really regimented existence, because the more they do that, the less risk and less hassle and less feedback and blowback it brings to them. You've maintained your authenticity and, you know, put out a personality into the world. Talk about that process.
And that's a great question. And I have seen and experienced that the more vulnerable you are and the more authentic that you are, the more people respond to you. I mean, we're all human beings. We're going to make mistakes. You know, mayors just make mistakes in the public eye. But I think if you're genuine and you approach issues not from a political perspective, but what is in the best interest of your community. If your passion and enthusiasm and love of your city becomes contagious, even when people disagree with you, they'll cut you some slack because they know that you're doing what you're doing in what you think is in the best interest of your community. And so I have no trouble poking fun at myself, although I may be starched in my shirts. I'm not a particularly starched personality. People can approach me anywhere, anytime, for any reason. And I think that resonates. And I think what I have discovered is that your city takes on the personality of the mayor. And if you're optimistic and if you're hopeful and you're aspirational and you're visionary and you're aggressive about driving an agenda, that will translate and transfer to the DNA of your community. And Tampa has become this place that is just alive. And, you know, I hope I've contributed to that. And I hope by just being who I am, in spite of the fact that, there's a title and there's a police dignitary protection team around, that I'm still the same guy that I walked into that office being. And I'm the same guy that I will leave on May the 1st. So, you know, titles are great, but you don't own them. They belong to the people that you serve. And so, you know, I started out as Bob and I will leave as Bob. And, you know, hopefully people will have recognized that.
So, if there's a value to authenticity and ideally, the system is set up against that as we kind of discussed. Kind of an odd way to look at it, but do you think with presence in the world where, for years we had this sort of, Mitt Romney gets recorded saying something, he's down in flames, and Hillary Clinton just gets recorded, says the deplorables thing, and it really affects her campaign. Guy who says anything and seems to, get by and it becomes okay. Do you think that's had a net effect in a weird way on the authenticity of politicians everywhere to see that they can go a little bit in this direction?
The answer is yes, but in the case of the current occupant of the White House, I don't think it's a positive movement. I think you can be authentic. I think Barack Obama was authentic. You knew what you were getting. You knew he was a good family man. You knew he was bright. You knew he was funny. President Trump takes it to a whole new level, and I don't think it's a direction that we want to go as a community. And so merely freeing people to say what they think, I don't think is necessarily a good thing, because sometimes people think things that are not in the best interest of the community.
Right.
And just because you have the ability to utter that doesn't make it positive.
Right.
And I think President Trump has been more destructive than he has been positive. There have been policy things that he's done that I've agreed with, but the way he has demeaned the office and harshened the rhetoric, to me, is unbecoming of the President of the United States. I mean, I'm sorry. That's not a political statement. That's an opinion. And I think most people would probably agree with me. I think authenticity is not what we see in this president. I think what we see in this president is a coarseness that is, he couches in terms of authenticity, but that is destructive for the greater good.
Another thing he's obviously brought to the forefront is the concept of fake news. So when I say fake news to you, how does it make you feel?
Makes me mad. I mean, I'm the son of a journalist. I mean, I grew up with ink on my fingers. My dad was a working journalist in Washington, D.C. I think the Fourth Estate is necessary. I think it does the country a service. I think it keeps in check the worst impulses of America. I think it is needed, it is valued, and it has to remain strong. Him demonizing the press, I think, does a great disservice to the democracy and to the republic. And I think absent an aggressive, vigorous Fourth Estate, we're going to be in far worse shape, because they keep people like Donald Trump in check to the extent possible. Now, he tries to diminish them because they are critical of him and plants the seeds that undermine these institutions, just like he has done with our military leadership, just like he's done with our law enforcement agencies. Because of his personal problems, he thinks by diminishing those institutions that somehow whatever calculations or conclusions they come to will be lesser as a result of that, is flat out wrong. I mean, I think it's un-American. I think a strong, active, vigilant press is a good thing, and we've got to continue that. I mean, we need less of Donald Trump and more of a accurate, fact-based press that's objective, that's unbiased.
And I think one of the potential issues in that is and this is a general issue, which will lead me into my next question, is the lumping together of so many different people, left, right, angling, truly true to journalistic ethics, and just lumping them all into one word, the media, right? And it's hard because you can always find an example of everything just to serve your point when you do that. So, obviously there's a ton of information that comes to you, and to some extent you have to profile and you have to narrow down. And it's hard to really get into the nuance without just saying in general, the media, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you balance that needing to generalize versus understanding all the nuances underneath that?
Certainly with the mainstream press, and I'm covered every day and have been for years. I don't always like what they write, but I have found them for the most part to be factual, not to be biased, to try to do their best to get to the bottom of whatever their circumstances are. That doesn't mean I always like the coverage. That doesn't mean there sometimes are factual lapses. That doesn't mean that sometimes I would like to portray the city side of the issue better than it was reported. But you're not going to hear me complain about it, because that's their job. Blogs, some of them are entirely different because they are not fact-based. Mm-hmm. And the amount of demagoguery and venom that gets spewed when someone can be anonymous really is disheartening. But I, for the most part, having done this for almost 30 years now, generally have a great respect for the press, great relationship with the press, and do my best to make sure that we make doing their job as easy as possible. So, I mean, I like being around reporters. I mean, I think they're fascinating. They're knowledgeable. And no, like my dad, if I had done something wrong, he would have put my hide on the wall. So you understand that going into that relationship, a politician to a reporter. But all you can ask is that they be fair. And for the most part, in my experience, that has been the case.
So then the takeaway from that is just to really understand your source, because you see a difference between journalists who are doing this for, known publications and people who are just putting up their own websites and whatnot. And that kind of gets muddled now.
It does, because people, if you look at newspaper circulation, not everybody gets up every day like I did as a kid, and there were like 4 newspapers that my dad was reading. And so I grew up reading newspapers. Now people get information from so many different sources that you don't know whether they're legit. And I look at my teenage daughters as an example. Sometimes they'll say things to me, and like every teenage girl, they spend their lives looking at their cell phone. And I'll ask them, "Where did you get that?" And they'll tell me, "Oh, I saw it on the internet." I'm like, "Well, honey, you got to be careful about, believing everything that you see on the internet, because a lot of it is not verified.
Yeah.
There are no, barriers to promulgating lies and misinformation. So just be careful. I mean, double check your sources."
Yeah, it's the running joke in our house is Ruth from Minnesota. Whenever someone will say something like that, we'll say, "Oh, that was Ruth from Minnesota. Put that on the internet."
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's and as a public figure, some of the scurrilous stuff that you see printed in these blogs and bandied about, it's no wonder that people choose not to enter public life.
And to the point that it is sometimes hard to tell where it comes from, and it's easy to obscure that because a Facebook post from a reputable news agency looks exactly the same as a Facebook post, from Ruth from Minnesota. And people probably have been for a long time, but now it's becoming more known that you can actually intentionally mislead for certain purposes, and misinformation, obviously with the election and all that sort of stuff is coming out there. So how much as you being the recipient of this attention, how much of it have you felt has been intentional and coordinated versus just some, kind of person's out there opinion?
Obviously at the mayoral level, it's not like the Russians infecting and invading our electoral system, which did occur and was planned and organized and carried out by foreign agents and enemies of our country. Most of the venom that I see at the local level is not necessarily orchestrated. It's just people with an axe to grind, and people who don't like you for whatever reason, or, who just want to tear you down because they can. Whether it's a political opponent, whether it's on a neighborhood issue. I mean, when you're the mayor, you deal with all kinds of things at the micro level. But yeah, there's some pretty venomous people out there. And whether it's on Twitter, whether it's some of the blogs, the local blogs, when I leave office, I may have to get an emoji that that I fire back at them that I haven't been able to do since I've been the mayor.
And along those lines, I think one of the potentially frustrating parts of having to hear everybody is the one issue, passion voter. That is just, this is the issue that matters, whether it's something in the environment or, something like you said, some neighborhood issue. And so is that something that people come up and you feel like a lot of times they're so focused on one issue that it just blinds them to the rest of the world?
They do. And for some, that's how they base their opinion of you. Fortunately, they are a minority. I think the majority, certainly as mayor, look at the totality of your work. And being a mayor is a very different kind of job than being a U.S. senator or even a governor. Being a mayor and a choice for mayor is a very personal, intimate choice. They want to see you and touch you and feel you and go eyeball to eyeball with you and take the measure of you. So you can't carpet bomb your way into being the mayor. So yeah, there are folks that, that one issue that gets stuck in their craw and they'll never forgive you for. But most people, particularly if you go back to that authentic question, if they think that you are doing this for the right reasons, and even if they disagree with you, they're like, okay, but I know he loves Tampa, or she's doing this for this reason. They're going to cut you a break. And they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and they're going to measure your record and whether or not they want to vote for you or reelect you based on, the tangible things that they see occurring in their city, and having taken a measure of you, whether they think you're in it for the right reasons. People can see through phonies.
You've mentioned that you prepared for the mayorship for 20 years. You've been on this sort of journey to this place for now 30 years. And to some extent, this is a crescendo for local politics. So sort of emotionally as a man, knowing that you're now at the pinnacle, there's some, obviously potential next steps, but to some extent, it is a journey completed. So how's that been resonating with you?
It's, I would imagine it's like an athlete who's played his or her last game, or a fighter pilot that's landing on the deck for the very last time. When that moment comes, that nothing in your life that you will do after this will be as fulfilling or as much fun as what you've been doing for the last 8 years. You spent your whole life training to get to that point. It's been your focus. You got a chance to do it. Hopefully, people will look at my time as me going out at the top of my game, not lingering like athletes tend to do. But yeah, it will be challenging for me to sort of fill that gap. I don't know that I'll ever find anything that will be as much fun as this. I probably will find things that will pay better, which is fine. But I don't know that I will ever do what I've spent the last 8 years doing, and that is getting up every day and I can't wait to get to the office. So you got to find something to fulfill the next 10 years of my working life. I'm too young to retire. I don't have any hobbies. I'll go crazy if I stay at home, and my wife will go crazy if I stay at home. And so, I got to find something that will at least to some degree take the place of what I've been doing for the last 8 years, but I know it will not be the same.
And one aspect of that, of what's not the same, is power. And
Mm-hmm.
tell me about your relationship with power, how, it's rare. I guess it's not rare in politics, but from a human experience, it's rare to have sort of an expiration date that's so exact on power.
Yeah, it is.
So, tell me about your relationship with power.
I look at it as a force for good. I'm recognizing that this job belongs to the people who hired me to do it, and all the trappings that come with it are not mine. But that if you use it correctly, certainly as a mayor, you can transform a city and you can change a city's direction. And I hope I have done that. Tampa's a very different place than it was 8 years ago, with the potential for even greater change moving forward. So for me, power was a means to an end. And that end was changing this place, making it competitive again, making it a destination for the best and the brightest. And I think we're well on the way to that journey. And so to the extent that I was part of that, I can walk away pretty happy. Power is always hard to give up. But I'll tell you what will make it easier for me is having lost before. Because you realize then that, number one, who your real friends are. Two, that you can get up on Wednesday after a bad Tuesday and life goes on. And three, that it wasn't really yours to begin with. And so as long as you understand that it's not your job, you are not the permanent mayor. You were there for 8 years at the behest of the people who you serve, and that there will come a time when you have to give all that up. And so for me, it was about maximizing every moment that I was there. So much so that when I was reelected in 2015, the next day I put in a countdown clock in my office and in the boardroom to remind me, although I knew it intuitively, but also to remind our staff that we are here for a limited period of time. And when that clock hits 000 and it's getting close, that our time is up. And so we've got to finish this job. And so, I drive people pretty hard because I know that we're not going to get this chance again. This moment for this group of people will end on May 1st.
And I know your time is precious. I do appreciate you.
No, this is great. No.
We finish each episode with a shout out. Particularly someone under the radar, maybe, that's done great work and hasn't, you'd like to give a little attention to.
Titus O'Neil, also known as Thaddeus Bullard. That is his given name. Titus O'Neil is a WWF wrestler. The guy's got a heart as big as his body. And he is a guy that just gives back to this community in so many ways. Had a tough childhood, but he has used his fame and used his personal treasure to really go out and become a force in this community for good. And yeah, he's a big man, and yeah, he's kind of a celebrity, but he's in it for the right reasons, and I just think Tampa is better because of him.
Wonderful. Thank you. You've made it to the end of another great episode. For more SPX, visit stpx.com. Thanks again to our sponsors, CapEx Advisory Group, build with confidence. CapEx provides owners representation for the most demanding construction projects. With deep knowledge of design, finance, construction, and public policy, CapEx brings your project to life. CapEx supports your organization with leadership and expertise to reduce cost and ease the burden on your team. Discover what an owner's rep can do for you. Discover CapEx Advisory Group. Visit ceag2.com. That's CEAG, the number 2.com. And thanks also again to OPEN, the Open Partnership Education Network, which puts on great events around St. Petersburg, including Arresty speakers. To see the upcoming calendar of events, visit learnopen.org.